Good news, people! We finally found out how to determine the centroid of areas of weird shapes. Such as this weird little piece of art here. Don't believe us? Well, you better buckle up for a wild ride then. I hope you guys already know what a centroid or center of gravity is. If you don't, watch our awesome video about the subject. If you don't know what they are, you won't make head or tail of what I'm going to be talking about. Let's bring our beautiful example into this. I hope you can all recognize the two areas that make up this little hot mess. A right-angled triangle and a rectangle. Let's first determine the centroids of individual areas. In the case of the rectangle, this centroid is, surprisingly, simply located in the very middle. Did you figure that out already? Give yourself a clap. For the triangle, it's a bit harder to determine the centroid. Now, there are two ways to determine the centroid of a right-angled triangle. Here's method 1. We look it up in a table that simply lists the centroid. Or we use method number 2, which is to determine the centroid through integration by hand. Method number 1 is both easy and fast, and method number 2 is just horrid. With simple figures, you should just consult the tables for the answer. It's best to just note down the centroids for the most important shapes in your formula booklet. For the right-angled triangle, our formula collection specifies the values 1/3 for x as well as y. Make sure to note the orientation of the triangle, however. If the triangle is oriented like this, you should of course take a 2/3 step in the x direction. Alright, now we know the centroids of the individual areas. However, we still don't know how to determine the centroid of both shapes combined. Now, we get to the part where your formula collection cannot bail you out anymore. Instead, we can determine the centroid using this formula over here. Wow, what? What in the world is that supposed to be? No worries, we didn't mess it up. It's supposed to look like this. Let's take a look at the individual parts of the formula first. XS is the x-coordinate of the joint centroid. A represents the surface area, and the I is an index. Therefore, AI means surface area of part I. The second x again represents the x-coordinate of the centroid. However, not of the joint centroid, but only of the centroid of part I. This might seem confusing at first, but trust me, as soon as we start running through the entire calculation, it will start to make sense. The funny little symbol on the left side of the denominator and numerator is not a misshapen E, it's a large sigma, which is used as the symbol for sum. This means that all the stuff that comes next is simply added together. A quick example, you have various xs's with different values. Sigma xi simply means the sum of this entire x. In our formula, the same applies. The small I now is the index for the various areas. Let's run through the calculation real quick, and you'll see that it will actually start to make sense. Let's return to our initial figure. For the rectangle, we choose the index 1, and for the triangle, we'll pick index 2. Fun fact, you can simply place your system of coordinates wherever you want. It really doesn't matter where you put it, you will always get the correct centroid. Here, we just choose to dump it in the bottom left-hand corner. First, we'll take a look at the denominator, because it looks quite harmless. Here we should add the areas together, which means the sum of A1 and A2. That's all we have after all. The surface area of the rectangle is simply 10 times 15, and that of the triangle is 6 times 15 divided by 2. That's not that hard, is it? Now we move on to the numerator. Here, we first need to multiply the surface area by some sort of x before we add everything together. The xi stands for the respective centroid of the partial area. For example, the x1 for the rectangle is 15 divided by 2, and for the right-angled triangle, we get 1/3 times 15. Let's insert all that stuff here. We need to make some space. There we go. As you can see, things start to clutter quite quickly if there are any more areas in play. Therefore, you should just make sure to practice a lot and the problems in your exam will be easy as pie to solve. If you inserted everything correctly, the result should be 6.92. This is the x-coordinate of the new centroid, which is the centroid of the complete area. The calculation for the y-coordinate is done in the exact same way. But of course, you need to substitute the y-coordinates for the individual areas instead. Be honest with me, that wasn't hard, was it? So let's do a quick recap of that. First, we determine the coordinates of the individual centroids. It's best to just use a table of values whenever possible. Then, we insert the values into the formula for the new centroid. And hey presto, we have determined the coordinates for the centroid of the total area. As always, we thought this was loads of fun. Get cracking, guys!